Amazing parenting. We empower parents to positively impact their children.
Hello parents, Grace here with Amazing Parenting. How are you today? How's your family? How's your children? How's your relationship with your children? If it's not going as good as you want it to, no worries, no stress. Because on this channel, you will find over 200 videos on parenting tips, styles, instructions, strategies, ideas to help you build that strong, rich relationship with your children. So if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe. Leave a comment below. Give us a thumbs up if you're enjoying what you're listening to and hearing and seeing. And then share these videos with at least one or two other parents, because so many parents need this kind of content, need this kind of information, and they don't know where to get it from. They're stressing with their children, they're stressing in their families, all because their relationship with their children or with their child is not going the way they want it to be. So go ahead and share these videos with at least 2 or 3 other parents. Okay, let's get into today's session. So we're going to split it into 2 sections. We'll look at some today and we'll look at some again at another time. So today we're talking about the richness of storytelling with your children. Now you might be thinking, storytelling, my children have grown, we don't do stories anymore. But as we go through this session, you will see how storytelling can be used throughout your child's life. Right up until, teenage years, you can use storytelling to help bring them out with emotions, help bring them out with what's going on in their lives. So let's get through these sessions and see how you can use storytelling with your children. So let's look at the first one. Stories create emotions. When you're talking to your children about stories, they're relaxed. When our children are relaxed, they're more in that position to listen. They're more in that position to trust. They're more in that position to just be calm when you're telling them a story. So that's the first thing we need to understand in storytelling. Storytelling brings that calmness, that trust, and that warm emotion between you and your child when you're telling them a story. So number 2, storytelling builds strong emotions. Sharing stories creates the atmosphere of, what's happening next? What's happening in this story? How does this story relate to me? And if your child is very young, as we know, when you read a story, they're excited to hear what's happening. But as your child gets older, you can use scenarios as stories to talk about what your child is possibly going through at school. So sometimes it might be difficult and awkward to bring up a situation that they're going through. But if you tell it through a story, not necessarily using their name or their school or exactly what they're going through, but if you bring it as a scenario story, your child is more likely to picture themselves getting through that situation. They're more likely to picture themselves winning through that situation. So storytelling through scenarios is a perfect way to get your children talking to you about things that they're going through. So that's number 2. Number 3, stories help children feel understood. So like I said, your child might be going through something that's a bit awkward for them to talk to you about. But when you bring up a story or talk to them about a story with them in mind, they're more likely to feel, yeah. My dad understands me. My mum knows what I'm going through, because you're talking to them in a storytelling way. It makes the conversation flow. It makes the conversation easy to listen to. So it's really important that when we're telling stories to our children, especially if they're a little bit older, that we're making it easy for them to see themselves winning in that story, achieving what it is they want to achieve in that story. For example, they might be really stressing about their exams or their 11 plus or their SATs. So if you tell them a story, not using their name, not using their school, not using their teacher, but tell them a story of how a child can get through their SATs or their exams within mind. At the end, it is triumphant. The child is able to picture themselves in that story. Okay, number 4, stories make learning personal. When you want your child to learn something, put them in the story, especially when they're young. Put them in the story. So you've got, the toys out, and you want them to learn how to count. We're talking about young children now. You want them to count. So you get the toys out, you get the marbles out, the sweets out, and you get them to count using them in the story. So you say, Sally had 10 sweets. She had her friend Mary, and she wants to give Mary 3 sweets. How many sweets? So you use them in the story. You talk about how they went to the shop to buy the sweets, how their parent gave them the money you make it into a story, and it helps them to learn, because we learn by pictures. We think in pictures. So when our children can see pictures in their head, it's more likely that they're going to remember what they learned. It's more likely they're going to make it personal, and they can remember what it is you're teaching them. Okay. And then lastly, we can look at storytelling strengthens communication. Now, all what we've just said, we're talking. We're constantly talking, and we're giving them space to talk back. So it really strengthens conversation, because when you're having these storytelling times, or you're talking about a thing or an issue that your child is going through, you're bringing in conversation. You're allowing your child to talk about something that they're going through, but they can do it through a story. They can then tell you the story, or a story that they're going through, or a made up story where, they're really the focus, but they're telling it as a story. They're telling it as a scenario. So it really builds communication between you and your child. So if your children are very young, you can use storytelling. Like, it brings that comfort. You're cuddling up with them in bed, or they're sitting on your lap and you're talking to them, you're reading them a story. It brings trust. It brings them understanding that your voice is a voice of comfort. Your voice is a voice that they can come to hear, comforting words, to hear wisdom. That's what it teaches young children when we sit and storytell with our children. When our children get older and we storytell in scenario form, again, it helps them to understand that my dad understands what I'm going through. My mum gets me, simply because of the story and the style you're telling the story in. So go ahead and try these storytelling tools with your children, and see if it helps you bring more conversation out. See if it helps them, talk to you more, or talk to you about different things, or things they've never talked to you about, simply by using this storytelling technique. So, like I said, if you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and subscribe. Leave a like, leave a comment, share these videos. And remember, all parents can be great parents. It is a journey, and we will get there. Thank you, and God bless.
Amazing parenting. We empower parents to positively impact their children.